Number 1.
I live in the Midwest. I'm a 20-year-old female, and I work at a casino in the housekeeping department. This happened about 2 days ago. I was cleaning a room on the 4th floor when an old man comes up and says his key card wasn't working. I told him he'd have to go to the front desk and get another key, but if they didn't want to help him, to come back and I'll open it for him. Now let me explain how the housekeeping works here. I clean a room. We have supervisors that come and double check our rooms to make sure we aren't missing anything. I was in my last room of the day. So anyway, 10 minutes later he comes back and says,
"I got in, but I have no towels."
Which I found odd because I did that room earlier. I went over and sure enough, no towels. I tell him I'll be right back to bring him some. He replies,
"Okay, I'm gonna get ready."
Okay. I come back not even 5 minutes and knock on his door. "Housekeeping." He answers with just his head peeked out. Door opened enough to let me in. I walk in and he is completely naked. Only an olive green robe. Didn't look embarrassed. Didn't cover up. I look straight to the ceiling and say, he says,
"Oh, it's okay. I'll hide behind the door."
One of the first rules when I got trained is to never go into a room by yourself. But he said he was hiding behind the door, so I thought he would leave it opened. I ran into the bathroom, started to put the towels on the rack, and then I hear it. The door closed. Now, I know a lot of people have been to hotels, but for those who haven't, doors automatically lock from the outside. You'd need a key card to get in. Right when I heard the door closed, I ran for it. I heard the old man say,
"Ma'am, I have a question to ask you."
And all I said was, "Okay," and kept running. I went down the hall and found my supervisor and told her. The next day, she looked in the room after he checked out in case he hid them and couldn't find the towels. This may not sound creepy, maybe just some old silly man. That's what I thought until today. Another housekeeper found the towels in the room he was in. He hid them under an extra pillow in the drawer. That was the most terrifying experience I've ever been in. He could have done much more. We do have cameras and people watching us 24/7, but there are no cameras in the rooms. He could have locked the door and no one would have found me until it was too late. That's the one thing that gives me goosebumps.
Number 2.
A year or so ago, I found myself, alongside my now fiancé, the victim of the horror stories I love so much. I've been a fan of horror stories since I was a kid, but after the events I'll mention, it took me a while to enjoy them again. Back in 2015, my boyfriend of 3 years and I broke up. I essentially had mental health issues I was struggling to accept while we were together, so we took some time apart. During the few months, I modeled. Some bog-standard modeling, and some of the nude variety. I even had a Tumblr for behind-the-scenes activities that I'm not proud of, that's now gone. I got paid well, so I thought nothing of it, until I got contacted by some fans. These fans are creepy to the point that they have bombarded me with comments about wanting to have sex with me by force if necessary. This continued for a while until my ex, scared these guys might figure out personal information about me, white knighted me to defend me from their pursuits. Big mistake. To protect me from their virtual threats and comments that I was brushing off as nothing since, hell, it was Tumblr, he used his personal account. The account that had his real name, my real name, pictures of us, and the city we lived in. He hadn't used it in years, so he didn't remember any of this being on his profile. We never knew it had caused the problems it did. But like the creeps they were, my fans tried to use this information to meet up with me. When I refused, it all took a turn. With the messages and Snapchats alongside spam on other platforms, I just started to ignore them, hoping it'd calm down. My ex received a lot of the usual death threats that ensue with Wight knighting on Tumblr, and we were both starting to get our lives in better places. Until I got a message that scared me to the bone. The message contained the name of where my ex worked. He hadn't worked there long at this point, maybe a month or so, but he didn't broadcast his job. Only friends and family knew he had it. And apparently, so did my fans. When I tried to make it seem like I knew nothing to prevent any further threats, they responded with, "We could just wait around for him until after his shift," before sending me a picture of his work location. "Will you meet us now?" I pleaded and begged for them to leave him be, scared they'd actually do something, for them to leave him alone. I thought it had worked, but they never responded. After making sure my ex was okay, I tried to calm down for a few days. Then came the next photo message. The bus stop my ex used to get home in the center of our city. I contacted him to find out where he was, and luckily he was on his way home a few minutes prior to that photo. I assumed they wouldn't know where to go even if they got on the bus and decided to leave it at that. I didn't want to scare my ex. I still loved him. I didn't want him endangered because of my stupid, naive actions. He was probably suspicious at that point, but he never said a word to me about it. A day or so later, I received a new photo message. They were on the road near his house. That made me lose it. I texted my ex, got him to lock his doors and windows. He wasn't the only one home. He lived with his family at this point, the people I used to live with, whom I lived with for 2 years prior to our breakup. Not knowing at this point how they got the information, we were both honestly scared for our lives. That night, I got an unexpected Skype call from my ex. He explained to me how he'd had enough, how they told him they'd hacked his phone and my laptop to track us down, and how if he didn't end his life, how they'd reveal to my family and friends my private life. He apologized as he started swallowing a bunch of pills before apologizing to me for everything and hanging up. I freaked. No one expects that. I truly believed my ex had gone to kill himself until I received a text from his old phone, a number he hadn't used in years. He told me how he was okay and how we had to fake his death to keep them away. I played along, even to the point of messaging these fans, telling them I was going to the police and how I'd track them down, how they killed my baby's father. I told them I was pregnant to see if that would get them to calm down, to no avail. They apologized for my loss and appeared to disappear after that. Until the end of last year. My ex and I, after this disaster, got back together since we both knew living without each other wasn't an option. We got engaged and started looking for places to live, usual adult decisions. One day, in October, I got a message on my personal Instagram. "We're still watching." Since that point, I've made sure we have been careful about what we post. We've changed devices and got rid of our webcams. To my fans, if you ever see this, let's never meet.
Number 3.
This happened on the west coast of the United States back sometime between 2004-2005 and was by far the most scariest thing that ever happened to me. Looking back on it now, it was the most dumbest thing I've ever done because of all the reckless mistakes that were made back then. It still creeps me out every time I think about it. So my roommate at the time had been chatting with a guy she met off a party line. He invited her to his house to hang out, and since she didn't have a car, he offered to pick her up. She agreed, but didn't want to go alone to a man's house she had never met, so she asked if I could come along. I stupidly agreed to tag along because, 1, I didn't want her to be by herself in case something bad happened, and 2, I didn't have anything else better to do, so why not? He said yes, I can come too, and came to pick us up an hour and a half later, around 8 p.m. that night. We met him outside in our parking lot. He was an older man in his 40s to 50s. We were in our early 20s. Fairly normal looking and seemed nice, so we chatted for a few minutes, then got in his car and drove off. He stopped to get gas, buy my roommate cigarettes and our favorite liquor. He lived in an area which was almost 1 hour and 15 minutes away from where we lived. We call this area the Boondocks, since it's mainly nothing but mountains, desert, wild animals, and poor cell reception. This should have set some alarm bells off, but no. We finally made it to his house, and he gave us a tour throughout his very nice 5-bedroom house, and we decided to barbecue some steaks and get in the jacuzzi. So far, everything is going great, and we are all just talking, joking, drinking, and laughing. He took us into the kitchen to make sides for the steaks. While on the way to the kitchen, we noticed pictures on the wall of kids and a wedding photo of him and his wife. He nonchalantly admitted he was married and his family was out of town, like it was not a big deal. Wow, okay. And this is when things start going downhill. He then proceeded to ask if we partied. We said no, we don't do drugs other than weed. He then brought out a huge bag of white powder that I immediately assumed to be cocaine. He made a couple of lines on the kitchen counter and snorted them right in front of us. By this time, alarm bells started to go off loudly with my roommate and I. Finally, right? And I started thinking of ways of how we were going to get out of there. We had no cell phone reception, no car, and had no idea what his address was or exactly where we were at. It's about 1 or 2 a.m. now, and he starts acting weird, talking loudly, cursing, and accusing us of stealing DVDs, specifically The Incredibles DVD, which he checked, and it was actually inside his DVD player. He kept saying he didn't remember my roommate wearing glasses earlier and accused her of stealing his wife's pair of eyeglasses. My roommate is basically blind without her glasses and wears them all the time, so I don't see how he didn't remember her wearing them when he picked us up. He then turned around and accused me of stealing the earrings I had in my ears. Of course, we were beyond ready to go. We told him to take us home. He yelled no, and he'll take us home when he gets ready to, and asked if we wanted some pickles. No, we just want to go home. After about 30 minutes of him ranting on about security cameras, how he has guns stashed everywhere in his house, Pickles, and calling us bitches, he snorted another line and said he was going to take us home now. Normally, we wouldn't have gotten into a car with a cokehead driving, but we definitely didn't want to stay there a second longer. My roommate and I got into the back seat and he yelled,
I'm not a chauffeur, so one of you needs to get in the front seat now, or we're not going anywhere.
So of course, since he was my roommate's chat buddy, she got in the front seat. He then started speeding down the highway, still yelling and ranting. I was hoping he would get pulled over by a highway patrolman, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. About 10 minutes away from our place, he suddenly starts acting nice again, saying how much fun he had and we should all hang out again. Yeah, right, dude, never again. We basically jumped out of his car without saying anything, and about an hour later, he called my roommate and asked her if we wanted to go to the movies and out to eat later that day. She told him no and to lose her number. We never called the police because we basically didn't know anything about this dude, just that he snorted coke, was married, and lived somewhere in the middle of nowhere. But my roommate did tell me she called his house a month later, hoping his wife would answer so she could tell her everything that happened, but he answered, hung up, and ended up changing his number a few days later. Thankfully, we never saw or heard from him again.